welcome to Cage Minds Uncensored. I'm your host, Micah Frankel. A shout out to Edwin Ruiz, Mac10, MMA, CK10, a great supporter of mine, of CageMinds.com, of a lot of great combat sports athletes nationwide. Also, the starters of the I Got Your Back anti-bullying campaign. You're on Facebook. Again, that's MMA CK10. Go and give Mac10 a like. This week we have a lot to talk about, including I bet that your decision and mine is much better than what the judges handed us Sunday morning in Liverpool. The combat sports world is on fire right now, and England is the place to be. Bellator and the UFC this weekend there. Let's get started actually talking about Bellator. Even though Paramount can't put them first, even though reruns of Roseanne and Mom are more important than putting Bellator on live here in the States, I could not understand for the life of me why you can't run the event live for the people that want to see it here in the States, as you did have the prelims on live with your Bellator app, and then we got cut off from seeing the main card, held hostage from seeing it because we had to wait for Paramount to allow us to watch Bellator 200 Friday night, just because it's their time slot. I still don't understand why you can't play it live and then again play a replay, tape delayed replay, because that's what you're doing anyway. Give us the live feed. You had it going on in parts of the world on YouTube even, but us here in America were not allowed to watch it in North America. I don't get that. We deserve better from Paramount. We deserve better from Bellator. We should have been able to watch Bellator 200. And for the people online that are mad about the spoilers, most events are reported on live. Whether it's a one championship, a M1, you're not waiting for a tape delay anywhere in the world except for Bellator wanting to throw us back to the Stone Age. Not like we're in modern times, not that you couldn't go live off of Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, this possibility, that possibility. We're disappointed in you off the bat, Bellator. But I will congratulate you in being able to muster up the ability to put on your own card for once. Traditionally, when Bellator is overseas in Europe, they need help from Cage Warriors filling out the card. This was an all Bellator production, so congratulations for Bellator to being able to do that, put on a full production. Phil Davis kicks off the night. Now let's get to talking about the fights. Phil Davis kicks off the main card, which we didn't get to see, but kicks it off with a third-round knockout, landing the head kick on Linton Vassell. The Bellator light heavyweight division that was there when Phil Davis signed with Bellator has been dominated by Phil Davis. Now I believe it's something like 6-1 with the split decision loss to Ryan Bader. Phil Davis has dominated except for losing another split decision to Ryan Bader. 0-2 against Ryan Bader, but has dominated the rest of the division. I don't know where Phil Davis goes next. You'd almost have to expect, like when Bellator signed Leo Letty and bring him in at the last minute, that the most likely option for Phil Davis is not somebody that we've seen in the Bellator cage before. Now, Vadim Nemkov, the Fedor Emelianenko protege, seems like a very viable option. Coming off of a win over Liam McGarry, he could be the next person to fight Phil Davis. But again, you run into this impasse where, is that a number one contenders fight? Ryan Bader is totally wrapped up in the heavyweight Grand Prix. Do you have a Bellator interim title? Do we even need it from where we see the titles are placed on cards? Phil Davis losing the title on a prelim portion, basically, of the Bellator pay-per-view. Phil Davis, a great performance, but I don't know where he goes next. But we have seen Phil Davis excel against the competition that Bellator has put him against. Mike Shipman, an 11-second knockout. Big right hand and just destruction of Tom Green. That was beautiful. Not going to talk about the reality star too much, except for Ash Griffiths at 4-5 or 5-5. I didn't think was the caliber of competition that Bellator MMA would be showcasing on one of their main cards. That's my thoughts about that. Co-main event, Michael Venom Page, the Cobra, coiled and ready to strike, bouncing around lightly. clearly seeing everything that David Rickles was going to throw before he even threw it. It was like Michael Venom Page was living in the Matrix. Those straight shots, just stinging, destroying Rickles. The overhand rights were devastating when they were flung. Great 1-2s. They were all really straight punches. I am blown away by the performance of Michael Venom Page. And then the right hand that just destroys the left eyebrow and eye of David Rickles. David Rickles, the caveman, a tough guy that we've seen in the Bellator cage many, many times in tournaments, has fought at welterweight and lightweight. Rickles is one of those guys that would be great at 165. Venom Page, I think, is the guy that would be at 175. So a slight size difference. Page, though, just destroys, takes away the soul. Rickles is so demoralized that with his eyebrow busted open, he waves off the fight, and he has to run after the ref to be able to wave off the fight. Inept refereeing once again. An utter destructive performance that Michael Venom Page. Bellator MMA is obviously continuing to hype up the possibility of the Brits battling each other. Will we see Venom Page versus Paul Daley? That would be a big fight there for the UK MMA scene. Two devastating strikers. At this point, you wonder how much different would it be? But somebody has to be able to bring a fight to Venom Page. Paul Daley with that left hand, that one-shot knockout power, great flying knees. Maybe he's the type of fighter that could bring it to Page. Fernando Gonzalez, to this point, has done the best, but still undefeated. The unorthodox, amazing striking, dancing will in the cage and in between rounds. Michael Venom Page, something else. Paul Daley likely on the horizon. If not, why not Rory McDonald? Why not at 13-0? Go for that Bellator world title. Go for that Bellator welterweight strap. Why not? Why not Michael Venom Page versus Rory McDonald? We go to the main event. Rafael Carvalho gets his kicks off for the first 2 minutes. And then attacking the takedown is Gegard Mousasi, the challenger. Carvalho stands up. We have this chain wrestling of standing up, getting taken down. About the fourth takedown, finally Mousasi is able to get into a half guard. Right away, slides into the mount. Carvalho gives his back and gets pounded out. Gegard Mousasi now, a dream Grand Prix, the Strikeforce light heavyweight title, and now this Bellator middleweight title, a title collector throughout the world. Gegard Mousasi just like a hot knife through butter, utterly just destroyed Rafael Carvalho. Carvalho taking the title from Halsey, defending it against Manhoof and Alessio Sakara. You kind of wondered about the validity of Rafael Carvalho in the overall scheme of MMA, and Gegard Mousasi showed that we're talking about a top 5 guy versus a top 30 guy. Just domination from Mousasi, who then follows it up by calling out Rory McDonald. That could be the money fight for Bellator. McDonald, Mousasi, two veterans that have a big stake in the MMA world. To be honest, that's not where I was going, though, going into this fight. In this fight, I was sure that even though he doesn't have the wealth of experience under his belt in the MMA realm as a martial artist, Rafael Lovato Jr. has earned this opportunity. We know the fight with Salter was pushed off due to injury. He took out Harris. I think that Lovato Jr. should be next to fight Gegard Mousasi instead of Rory McDonald. Rory McDonald, Michael Venom Page, for my money, would be a huge fight at this moment. Maybe Bellator finally works in their Page versus Daley, and then I guess you could do Mousasi versus McDonald. But I feel like both guys could defend their titles, dominate the divisions, really make a stamp on owning both divisions, and then have a super fight. You already have the, in essence, super fight going on of Ryan Bader has abandoned the light heavyweight division to go up to the heavyweight Grand Prix. So I'm not really sure what the validity of Bellator titles and divisions are. It's even more murky than what we have with the UFC. But talking about some title clarity actually going on live Friday night, live fights on Access TV. You had LFA 40 in Dallas, Texas, and the 145-pound, the featherweight title, has now been unified. Thon Lee, the interim champion, came out utilizing his taekwondo kicks, big kicks, even hitting a spinning back kick right into Kevin Aguilar's liver, but Aguilar, undaunted, would keep firing back his counter punches, clipping Lee with a right hand off of a missed high kick, making the kicker pay for missing his unorthodox off-balance strikes. Then hunting for the finish, going body head, another right hand clip to the temple, down goes Lee, vicious hammer fist because the ref was out of position, but Kevin Aguilar unifies and remains your LFA featherweight champion with his second consecutive title defense. You really got to believe it's time to get that strap off of Aguilar. He needs to be the UFC, or maybe Bellator MMA steals the guy. 145 pounds is all so deep around the world. Kevin Aguilar deserves the opportunity, definitely after this moment, to put himself against the top guys in the world. Damon Jackson, who Aguilar had knocked out to win the inaugural LFA featherweight title, has since then been on a tear, has won 4 in a row, all by submissions. Jackson continues that, dominating Jeremy Spoon. You have Levi Mouse demonstrating his striking, knocking down and then submitting Ray Trujillo. Miles John, probably the top 135-pound prospect that we have in MMA, not signed to one of the major 2 organizations right now. As a young man that we haven't seen in one of those organizations, Miles John, I believe, will be on his way to the Contender Series after submitting Eric Ellington, a talented wrestler who got caught in a front choke. Johns has showed off great boxing, gets the submission win over a wrestler here, a complete package who I believe deserves that opportunity to go to that next level. Saturday was a slow day to kick back and enjoy, as there were no fights after a busy Friday, but you were up early with me. I know you were. Sunday morning, the UFC was in Liverpool, and Jillian Robertson gets her second win in the octagon, takes down Molly McCann, gets on her back, finds the rear naked choke in the second round. Already starting off as a bad night for the British crowd, but they would get an exciting boost off of Tom Breeze. Almost 2 years away from injuries, and the middleweight prospect returns, finishing Daniel Kelly in the first round in under 4 minutes, working off of his jab. A left uppercut, perfect to the Kelly eye, would send Kelly in retreat mode, swarming for the finish. Dropping down from the pain was Kelly. Breeze finishing with the ground and pound. A big win for Tom Breeze, getting out Daniel Kelly, the 2-time judo, or the 4-time judo Olympian from Australia. There is rumors that the 40-year-old is retiring. A huge win for Breeze to knock out a guy that had beat Rashad Evans, a guy that had beat Shoeface Antonio Carlos Jr. A big win for Breeze, reasserting himself in that top prospect list. Also in the middleweight division, Darren Stewart was on a 3-fight skid. He saves his job with big power punches, finding the mark, and devastating grappler Eric Spicely. The second round TKO for the dentist saves his job. Claudio da Silva returns from injury, and I've got to be honest, I did not see him returning in such stellar fashion, relentlessly getting the fight to the ground, being able to take the back, and immediately after Nordine Taleb gives a thumbs up, the pressure from the rear naked choke is too much. Claudio gets the victory, undefeated at 12-0, another guy at 170 pounds to keep your eye on. Just another undefeated fighter. The wealth of talent that the UFC is accumulating here at 170 pounds is astonishing. Makwan Amadakani and Jason Knight engaged in what was the round of the year in the first round. 2 uppercuts from Knight, drop Americani. Don't know how the Swedish fighter was able to survive, but Americani after that relies on his wrestling and is able to hold the top position in the second and third rounds to get the decision victory. Mads Burnell controls the first 2 rounds of his fight against Arnold Allen with his takedowns. Burnell is starting to feel good, landing heavy lead there now that Allen was consumed with the thoughts of the takedown. Into the third round, where Allen defends a takedown with what they're calling a front choke. It was the ninja choke, that rear naked choke from a standing position. It's in deep. Allen makes the adjustments going down to the ground with Burnell and forcing the tap out. Arnold Allen, a stellar performance in a come-from-behind manner, definitely down, was being taken down, had to dig deep in the well and just submit a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Impressive stuff. On just days' notice, Craig White takes on Neil Magny in the co-main event, and after jostling back and forth in the clinch, which White was having a good amount of success in one of Magny's best positions, against the cage. Magny turns White, puts him against the cage, and puts a knee between the eyes. White drops the follow-up ground and pound. Neil Magny does what he had to do. An opponent on short notice. When you are a top 10 fighter in the world, you have to go out there, make an exclamation point, make a statement, and get a finish. And in just over 4.5 minutes, that's what Neil Magny did. To the main event, where you can't let it go to the judges. It's said all the time, and that's crap. In the highest level of the sports, you should be in a sport like kickboxing, MMA, boxing, in the highest level of combat sports. There has to be a level of competency in the judging. There should be. There's so many millions of dollars, guys' livelihoods at stake, title opportunities, endorsement opportunities, but yet judging is astonishingly bad. In a, let's be honest, not the most exciting fight of the year, Darren Till, the hometown Liverpool native, played the game of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, playing a fast man's game of long-distance striking with a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson who's been playing that game nearly his entire life. It's the game that the world-class kickboxer grew up playing. Till, the Thai striker, in essence of the matchup that I would most likely compare this to would be Shogun Machida, kind of stylistically, as did Shogun. Early, Till was landing some hard leg kicks, but the counter straight punches, just like what Michael Venom Page was throwing, those strikes were being landed by Wonderboy. This was a consistent game of cat and mouse, with Till being the aggressor, but yet still following what Wonderboy was doing, as Wonderboy was the one actually initiating most of the exchanges. The 5th round, the biggest strike of the fight was landed as a left hand clips Wonderboy on the back right side of his head. Till scores a knockdown. Obvious round 5 to Darren Till. We go to the judges' scorecards, and to the amazement of most people, the judges unanimously, 2 of them, base 49-46, that's 4 rounds to 1, see the bout in favor of Darren Till, and nothing speaks volumes like the shock and amazement that the FS1 cameras caught on Michael Chiesa, Michael Bisping's faces, who were the analysts in studio. Shock and amazement. Now, I screenshotted and retweeted from my Twitter afterwards the strike totals that they had due to the UFC, and it said 38-30 Thompson, that Wonderboy Thompson had landed more strikes. Well, now they've had time to adjust those numbers, and we still have the same numbers, 38-30, but somehow the names have switched, and Darren Till is said to have landed the more strikes, won the fight. Dana White did not agree. A poll that I saw with the majority of MMA media, I'm talking about 15 different writers, One person had it 48-47, Darren Till. So one judge and that one writer had it the same, but everyone else has had this fight 48-47 for Wonderboy Thompson. Once again, a combat sport event is marred by controversial judging. Darren Till missed weight the day before. With that, fighters that have missed weight and now fought the next day still in the UFC have won 8 of the 9 fights. It obviously appears to be an advantage, whether it's psychological, physical, whatnot. But it's a bad look for Darren Till. Somebody that was even had a special on UFC Fight Pass leading up, a star in the making, then to have a lackluster performance and get a hometown decision. It's hard to swallow. It's hard to see Wonderboy lose like this. And then it's even harder to think about now, if you're an athlete who gets offered that big opportunity to main event your first UFC, but you have to do it in your opponent's backyard, how much more detrimental is that? We've already seen the numbers. It's staggering when the UFC does an event in Brazil, how the winning percentage sways in the favor of the Brazilian fighters. Now seeing a controversial decision like this, where a world-class fighter played his game and loses a decision to the hometown fighter who missed weight, it's a hard pill to swallow in a close fight. The harder pill is the 4 rounds to 1. That is malarkey. 3-2, a lot of people could swallow. Most people agreeing the first 3 rounds were definitely Wonderboy Thompson's. Till may have started to win, accumulating some damage with those leg kicks in the later rounds. Definitely winning that 5th round with the knockdown. But the first 4 rounds, it's hard to pick out which 3 Till won. No decisiveness in the judging at all if you look at the scar cards anyway. But we're going to have to move on. And that's what Wonderboy Thompson talked about even afterwards. He can't get the decision reversed. But we all know that if the UFC felt the decision was wrong, they may matchmake towards that feeling, and that's what I think they're going to do. So where do we go from here in a welterweight division that obviously had a lot of movement going on Sunday morning? Well, here's another thing to think about. We have coming up here, just in 2 weeks, June 9th, your co-main event for UFC 225 is the Rafael Dos Anjos versus Colby Covington welterweight interim title fight. You got to imagine that the right thing will happen, and the winner of that fight is in line to face Tyron Woodley. All that being thought, I'd say the next fight for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, most likely matchup I think, would be Robbie Lawler, if Robbie Lawler is healthy. Still some kind of up in the airness about, is Lawler healthy? Coming off of a win in his first main event. That's both of these gentlemen. I think that Darren Till and Kamaru Usman should meet up next. They're both coming off of wins in their first main event. Both not the kind of dominant performances that the UFC would like to see. I think that they need to face each other. Neil Magny actually called out Kamaru Usman, but I think the Till matchup is more likely. For Magny, I think he does deserve a Fight Night main event, and that should come against Santiago Ponzinibbio, who due to injury was unable to fight Kamaru Usman, but I don't know if you lose the opportunity for a main event due to injury. So Magny, Ponzinibbio, Till versus Usman, the RDA Covington winner next to fight Tyron Woodley, and Wonderboy Thompson takes on Robbie Lawler. I know that leaves Jorge Masvidal, who's actually lost his last 2, looking for a fight, but why don't we match him up with what we're talking about it at Gunnar Nelson if he's healthy enough, or let's just go with Alex Cowboy Oliveira, who seems willing to fight anybody, anyplace, anywhere. An exciting time in the UFC welterweight division, and still always a bad time for judging in combat sports. Not sure how many of you saw or took note last week, but UFC vet Nikita Krylov, who as a free agent had went back home to Russia to Fight Night's Global with a better free agent offer sheet than what the UFC gave him, captured gold, knocking out Fabio Maldonado. Maldonado had been Iron Chin for so long, possibly a crack in that armor after so many great battles. A left hook puts him down from the clinch. Krylov picking up a gold belt, a big star in Russia. Again, remember, it's not just saying because it's Fight Night's global, but MMA is a global sport where no matter what promotion you are in, you can become a star, you can make a fortune, you can reach that ultimate goal. Now, also in free agent news, a new free agent move might have flown under the radar. Want to bring it up now. UFC has lost another member of the heavyweight division, Timothy Johnson, a believe from Dakota, North Dakota, South Dakota wrestler who fought 7 times in the UFC, going 4-3, has signed a contract with Bellator MMA. Johnson, a clinch fighter who really embraced his wrestling roots, known for his epic mustache and biomechanical upper shoulder tattoo, signs with Bellator after not receiving a great offer, not really a raise from the UFC. The UFC kind of undercutting a fighter that had just won over 500, again 4-3, coming off of a win over Marcelo Gloom. A possibility of signing with the PFL had been a consideration of Johnson's, but not matching up with the schedule of when he'd like to be active. He took what he felt was a much more lucrative offer to jump from the UFC to Bellator MMA. Again, you could probably guess that the lackluster offering that came from the UFC would most likely be due to the fact that Johnson was fighting to a lot of decisions. If you're a big knockout artist like Francis Ngannou, you're worth a lot of money. Heck, even if you're Walt Harris, who we'll be talking about, who's coming up fighting this weekend, he goes out there and fights on a shield, goes out there to knock out or get knocked out, and the fights are exciting. Johnson didn't have that same entertainment value. The UFC lets him walk away. I mentioned Harris. He's going to be in action this weekend. It's a short fight week. Friday night, yes, Friday night, the UFC is in Utica, New York. UFC Fight Night. We got 3 early prelims on UFC Fight Pass, including the long overdue debut at flyweight of Jose Shorty Torres, the 2-division Titan FC champion, taking on Jared Brooks, a phenomenal wrestling background. Brooks will be looking to take down Torres, who will be trying to defend, walk forward, and land his combinations. Striker versus grappler in the women's division, the featured UFC early super fight pass feature prelim, Jody Escobar taking on former WSOF strawweight champion Jessica Jag Aguilar. Go over the FS1 prelims in the lightweight division. Phenomenal striker David Tamor is taking on grinder Nick Lentz. You also got in the women's flyweight division. Sajara Eubanks looks to make that 125-pound weight limit this time, looks to get back into top contention, taking on Lauren Murphy. These are 2 of the top-ranked women in the division. A lot of anticipation in that one. The main card, John Vellante versus Sam Alvey, could be a slugfest, could be the fight of the night. In the welterweight division, a pair of vets, Ben Saunders versus Jake Ellenberger, the power of the juggernaut and suspect chins on both sides. I think that Ellenberger, he's been putting a lot of time in, working at the RVCA training center, working with RDA, working with Jason Perillo, Michael Bisping, hoping to see resurgence. I just think his hands are better, and that's going to come into play for Ellenberger against Saunders. Walt Harris meets Daniel Spetz in a featured fight there on the main card. 2 heavyweights. Both guys favor their striking. I feel a knockout coming. The co-main event, New York's own Gregor Gillespie, undefeated at 11-0, meets Vince from Hell Pichel. Pichel, a member of Dominic Cruz's Alliance MMA, a heavy-handed fighter. Gillespie likes to have that Conor McGregor kind of striking style. The more karate-based lower hands, but has a phenomenal grappling base. The power for Pichel could make the difference, but really looking to see if the wrestling will hold up from Gillespie. The main event, 2 top 5 ranked fighters in the bantamweight division. Number 5 ranked former bantamweight champion in the WSOF, talking about Marlon Moraes. He lost the debut split decision to Rafael Assunção, rebounded with a close split decision victory over John Dodson. I thought the wrestling in that one with Dodson's takedowns actually should have swung the judges in the other way, but all came to naught as the highlight reel knee from Moraes knocked out Aljamain Sterling, and that highlight knockout gives Moraes this opportunity to take on Rivera. Rivera, a 20-fight win streak, started out his career 1-1 and has since won 20 straight. A Bellator vet coming off a decision victory, which is 1 fight removed from the biggest win of his career, where Rivera beat Uriah Faber. And when you take down a legend like that, there had to be a ton of confidence grown and gain in that kind of matchup. A lot of questions to be answered. Moraes, we've seen him in five-round fights. We've seen him in some big spots. But Rivera, this is his first time, you think, getting tested. You beat Faber, you beat Thomas Almeida, and then fights with Cruz and Lineker both fall apart. You now have this opportunity against Moraes. 20-fight win streak. You should be a huge star. Kind of being mild-mannered, coming from Tiger Showman in New York, putting his head down and doing his work. Jimmy Rivera has not got as much notoriety as you think he'd get for being in 2 of the best fights in each of the last 2 years. His win over Almeida in 2017 was ranked as one of the top 50, but top 50 best fights of 2017. Again, a top 50 fight, his battle against Yuri Alcantara in 2016. 5-0 inside the octagon. Very good grappling, very good striking, a complete package. Jimmy Rivera has his opportunity to make a mark. With UFC 227 on the horizon, TJ Dillashaw versus Cody Garbrandt, the rematch. A phenomenal finish from Moraes or Rivera is a must, because that's the only thing that will overtake the star power the UFC sees in Dominick Cruz. Dominick Cruz may be sidelining himself into another title fight with saying, who's a bigger star than me to face Dillashaw or Garbrandt? A highlight reel, a fight of the year kind of performance between Moraes and Rivera could lead to one of them jumping into that title contention, which both should be in the current time. So the UFC Friday night, UFC Fight Pass early preamps, FS1 prelims, and the FS1 main card. Not to mention also Friday night, Access TV. You have LFA 41 lightweights in the main event there. Jeff Peterson on a 6-fight win streak. Also fights out of that Alliance MMA camp that we mentioned Vince Pichel from. Takes on American top team Brazilian representative Thiago Moises. Thiago actually was the former RFA lightweight champion who I believe defended the title 3 times, coming off of a loss to Robert Watley in the battle for the inaugural LFA lightweight title. Moises, great Brazilian jiu-jitsu. His striking has came along a lot. Peterson, very good striking, has some pop to it. You have undefeated Kyle Moda taking on tough grappler Bobby Lee in the co-main event. Fight that I cannot wait for, that I expect to steal the show and be the fight of the night. Hard-hitting hillbilly Kevin Kroom meets Nate Jennerman, 145 pounds. Jennerman, coming out of that Rufus Sport camp, has been working on his striking. Very good submission game. Kroom, a brawler who, when he gets on your back, has a great rear naked choke. Fighting now out of James Krause's Glory Kickboxing there in Missouri. Submission specialist Ben Newman is back. The Baker taking on Super Duper Bobby Cooper, a Bellator vet who wants to grind it up. Look for Newman to impose his submission will. You have a stat card 4 stellar fights at the top, not to mention undefeated Tim Hilly and undefeated Kylan Hall, both in action early on that main card. Access TV, Friday night from Minnesota, LFA 41. Saturday, UFC Fight Pass, the Super Fight Series, and then the main card on ESPN, your ways to watch Glory 54. Early on the prelims, you got Chicago's John Abraham, huge puncher coming on. You got Murat Gagori, one of the top lightweights in the world. You have Josh Johnsey versus Christian Baya in what's going to be a phenomenal lightweight bout, not to mention the dangerous knees of Daniel Olunga. Capping it all off with 2 title fights there on ESPN. The welterweight title is on the line with Harut Grigorian looking for his first successful title defense. And in the main event, you have Rico Verhoeven defending the Glory Heavyweight title against Mladen Brestov. Brestov, 56-12, looking to derail what has been a phenomenal run for Verhoeven. I believe it's something like a 13-fight win streak for the king of kickboxing, Rico Verhoeven. So you have that going on during the day Saturday. And then Saturday night, let's talk about the local scene. JacksonWink Fight Night this Saturday, June 2nd at the Isleta Resort and Casino. The main event, Abel Cullum versus Joshua the Destroyer Montoya, 135 pounds. Rematch. Cullum submitted Montoya in the first fight. Both guys have been out of action for over 3 years. Cullum currently training with Force of One, Eric Swan. They're in Clovis. Again, his grappling is his bread and butter. Montoya has had his share of grappling tournament experience. Over 20 fights in the mixed martial arts realm. His last fight, a grueling decision with Nick Urso. Also, Montoya having a boxing background. This one is sure to be a war. Montoya also, along with former King of the Cage champion Angelo Sanchez, the Samurai Warrior, they have been doing their thing, putting together a tough and tumble team there in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I expect nothing less than a war. Cullum Montoya. The co-main event, you have Alon Cruz taking on Steve Mean Machine Garcia, the Bellator vet. Garcia, a 21-second knockout of Night of Fury up there in Buffalo Thunder. His pro boxing debut. The long striker Steve Garcia wanted to put on another dazzling performance. What I think could be fight of the night, the flyweight division, Chris Cortez, a strong, heavy-handed grappler, meeting Ricky Escobar, LFA vet, a slick technical fighter who came off of a short notice rear naked choke win. Those two men have the potential to put together the fight of the night. Chris Brown meets Blake Smith in the lightweight division. Chris Brown, the much hyped, much talked about prospect. What can he do taking on a much more experienced opponent coming all the way from Florida to take on this challenge? Gene the Kid Perez returns to the MMA world. We've seen Gene a lot in boxing. His last MMA fight, a big left hand knockout over Johnny Yin. He's taking on Pushwang Liu, who is a one championship vet, a Nick Gonzalez protege who came from China over here to advance his MMA game. Super excited to see what happens there. Celine Haga versus Hannah Schaefers in the women's division. Haga, an incredible grappler. Can't wait to see her skills on display live. The feature fight of the amateur card, Austin Lewis, Ambrose Vigil. Sure to be a knockdown, drag-out kickboxing match with 4-ounce gloves. That one's going to be excited. Lightweight division, Seth Abeda, Kenneth Brown. I kind of feel that's going to be the same thing. Aaron Taylor, Tabari Grubbs. Let's see how long Taylor wants to work in his striking before he goes back to his wrestling. And the same thing goes for Julian Chavez taking on Randy Brown. Not to mention a women's bout 140-pound division between a pair of amateur debuters kicks off the night. So you have that local action this weekend. The following weekend, UFC 225, Holly Holm, Megan Anderson, Covington RDA for that interim welterweight title, and Romero Whitaker for the middleweight title. A lot to talk about next week. Two great events to enjoy this Friday night. Again, the UFC Fight Night 131 is this Friday. You also got LFA 41. Don't forget, during the day, Glory 54 taking place in Birmingham, England. So after you had Bellator 200 there in London, and then you had the UFC in Liverpool, Glory in Birmingham, big things there in England for the combat sports scene, as I said. I think that Rivera makes a big statement. Same thing with Gillespie, going with the local guys this one. But that main event is sure to be the fight of the weekend. Cage Minds MMA on Twitter and Instagram. Cage Minds Combat Sports News on Facebook is how to keep up with me. Also, keep paying attention to the Cage Minds Combat Sports News Facebook page, as we will be streaming the JacksonWink Fight Night 3 press conference this Wednesday and the weigh-ins this Friday. Thanks for listening.